very pertinent question which you have asked. And when we speak about a balancing act, I would say it is both an art and a science. It's like for any of you who are familiar with cooking, it's like a recipe. And recreating the recipe every single time is not an easy act for the HR, right? It's about getting those right ingredients. The dish may be decided by the CEO saying, you want to make some food. But the HR has a role to decide and plan proactively and say the right talent is available, the right ingredients, it is cooked in the right way, and it's replicated every single time. So it is all about training, retraining, upskilling the resources. So it is a kind of a challenge, but yeah, it is about blending it together. I wouldn't say deprioritizing something and prioritizing something else.
You having worked in multiple startups, and Acko is a very much a result organization like the rest of the world. How do you think this balancing act impacts the business results also?
No, I first of all don't know whether it's really a balancing act. The way I see this is, businesses are about people, right? I think if you are to really maximize potential of business, the only way it's possible is to create the right environment for people to actually thrive. So I think I wouldn't say it's balancing. I would say setting up the right practices, structures to all of that. It actually fuels the maximization of business. In my head, it's not a balancing act. It's about doing the right thing for people and ensuring the business succeed. I think that's as simply how I look at it.
Lavanya, over to you. How do you balance the well-being while at the same time being in semiconductor industry and globally the industry is very on an upward trend, so the pressure of business would be immense. So how do you contribute? How do you balance it with employee well-being at the same time, ensuring the performance continues to be there?
Sure, thank you. I would say, so I would like to say it's not about balancing, because never can HR choose between well-being and the results. It is about how HR how can the HR create a bridge so that these two coexist, and we are able to give a business justification with a very outcome-focused approach on why we should be focusing on well-being, with a very strong focus on ROI and a strong understanding of where the business is heading to. Because you can't have a HR strategy which is very different from what the business wants to do. So how do we bridge these two together helps create a balance for a CHRO when they create a strategy. That's how I would look at it. Thank you.
Ravi, your thoughts, please.
Great, thank you. I think it's a lot about, for us as HR folks, it's also balancing between stakeholders. A stakeholder could be a customer, it could also be an investor. Employees are stakeholders. It could also be a vendor who's actually coming in to help you with your project. It could be a colleague who is trying to balance something at home versus what's happening in the office. It could be a CEO who's actually trying to balance something with the board and people, or with the board and customers. So I think all of us play a very important role in this balancing that keeps going on all across in the organization. You're doing it on a day-to-day basis, and I think we play a very important role helping others balance the organization as well.
Thank you. Srinivasan, in your case, it's a very unique scenario where you will have a multi-geography team required. Now, culturally, they are very diverse, and you would require a different kind of work ethic from different cultures, different countries. How would you take that?
It's a balancing act. I heard different views, but I definitely think it's a balancing act. And the fact is, over the last few years, due to various factors, the generational divide, the pandemic, and now all the AI flutter that we see, has made that wire on which we are balancing very thin. Okay, so it's like a really struggle. Because it's never been, but it's even more now that it's no longer about people satisfaction versus productivity, right? It is people satisfaction plus productivity. How do you not make it an or but an and, right? And I think finding that fine balance is not easy. It's definitely not easy. You continue to be a champion of people, you continue to be the voice of the employee, etc. But the fact is that the business is struggling to find the perfect balance of their own between what the customer is expecting, what people are expecting, what the financial stakeholders are expecting, etc. And therefore, they are throwing a lot of things into the mix. There is a constant change. Even if you look at this whole work from home and not work from home bus, etc., you can see how things have changed. So you really have to be the change coach for the organization and help people manage the change in a manner where it doesn't deflate, but actually tells people why we are doing it and kind of motivates them to find their answers. Each people will have to find their own answers, but HR is in that point where they'll have to really help and support each of them find their own mojo in what they need to do. And I think that's the critical piece. And therefore the fundamentals don't change, just how we adapt to it and how we message things out, tell people why, and not just the how is where I think the balancing act comes from.
Yes, I guess it's an excellent segue to our next topic. I guess well-being, Sandhya, especially in a sector that impacts lives, is extremely important, and trying to deliver high quality service to your customers is also extremely important. So, what's your take? How would you balance customer service with your employees?
You decide to keep it as a balance, and we all believe that it has to be blended, I think. Especially the industry I come from, healthcare, it's seen a significant transformation. Post-COVID, from a reactive healthcare to it has become more of a preventive healthcare, right? So we are in a space where we do the cashless for employees who are covered by insurance, the government initiated programs like Ayushman Bharat. So we are a part of all of those initiatives. So we have a blend of 600 plus doctors working for us, 400 engineers present in 140 locations, and now as a part of the Bajaj Health family, we are post-acquisition. So it's been a challenge in terms of ensuring how you balance it with a high quality service. The way we look at it is, it's not deprioritizing employee at any point of time. It is more looking at saying embracing technology. What role does technology play and how does it make employees' life easier? That's the thought process. So every wellness program or initiatives which we offer to the customers or clients, I think the starting point, what our CEO says is, let the charity begin at home. Let us extend those programs for our own employees to make their work life more balanced. Let us have it within the organization to see how we can enable that. And that's the starting point of most of the things which we want to do. So, it is employees and the work schedules, how you do. Not even reaching the stage where a mental health issue comes up and we are giving a program called wellness. So, having those open communication forums and having those one-on-one surveys, whether they work or not work, when it is anonymous, you do get insights, right? What is the pulse of the employees, and work around that before we go out to the customers and say we have some offerings to give you, kind of a thing. So it all starts internally for us, and that's the focus which we look at.
So what you're saying is, in your case, even the preemptive measures that you do for your customers, you have actually done it in-house first.
Yes.
What has your experience been on those in-house projects?
I think the uptake is good in terms of those in-house things. Some of those enablers, when you say preventive health check for family members extension, or some of this creche extension facilities, because we have 36% or more women across levels. There's a good uptake in some of these wellness initiatives which are coming up, and financial well-being. I think there's a good take from the employee side on that aspect of it as well. So we have utilization of 40% plus people utilizing that. So that's where it is.
Thank you. Now, Ravi, your industry is at the other end of the spectrum, right? With real estate and infrastructure. And the very variety of employees that you would be dealing with through the social spectrum is very different, right? So, how do you deal with those kind of project deliveries where you have the whole spectrum of society working for you, and at the same time you have to drive employee efficiency and their well-being together?
Very interesting, and I think we are no different from healthcare, by the way. We also save lives, and we also provide a roof over people's heads, and we actually provide homes. So we are actually impacting lives as much as anyone else or any other
product. But yes, you're absolutely right. There's a whole spectrum of employees, and I think one needs to really understand, what segment of employees has which need, and if this is mapped out, then I think that becomes far more easier. So what we do, for example, we actually clearly map out what is required for somebody who's a supervisor on a site, as an example. Or you take somebody who's leading a design for that particular project, because they come in much before the project actually starts. They come in even before the approvals come in. And then, of course, you have somebody who's on the project all the time, right from the time it is conceived till the time it is handed over to a customer or to a, let's say, a society or an office. So if you look at what each one of them requires, there could be differences in the way in which they look at skills, the way they look at, what could be useful for them in that project, and also what is longer term as an employee. What do I need for the next project? What do I need to do, let's say, a few years down the line? So I think mapping this brings in that perspective. And then, of course, I can individualize and put in, let's say, structures and systems to ensure that we are meeting the need of different segments of employees. And I think not all of us are successful, and for sure we are not. We still struggle with this because it's a vast set of people that you are dealing with very different ambitions, very different aspirations. And sometimes it even changes from a project to a project. And sometimes you have to let go of certain skills in a project and relearn and unlearn and, redo the entire thinking for a very different project, because that's something a customer requires in a very, very different way. So, sometimes in between projects as well, we struggle with this. But it's a very interesting concept of trying to map what people need and then individualize the offering that you give.
That is a very interesting thought, Ravi, that you said, trying to cater to individual needs, especially with the spectrum that your industry is looking at. Are there any specific tools, technologies that you use to achieve this particular goal?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are no different from many others in the room. We also use tech, so a regular LMS that works and can be individualized at two levels. One is, of course, saying that this is what I need at an individual level, but also in a domain expert level, this is what a small set of people needs as well. Now, if you're able to do that with technology, I think it becomes very, very easy. Companies like ours also do not have a lot of offices. We have a lot of project sites. So we have a lot of employees on a project site. So technology must also reach those project sites. It could be on a phone, it could be on a device which is at a project. And I think if we are able to gather it from there on a real-time basis, then it's very easy to individualize it as well. But yes, it's a lot of technology that one needs to use to categorize between domain expertise and also individual skills that people have.
Thank you. Satheesh, moving to you. You are a digital-first company, right? Yeah. You are one of the few companies which went paperless way before anybody else did, and you have been able to scale also at speed. Technology has probably helped you a great deal. Has it also compromised, in your case, I'm being the devil's advocate over here, has technology also compromised the employee well-being to an extent at Acko?
Not really. I think I'll probably give you a bit more context about the business too, because you spoke about paperless. And see, we trying to change an industry where the order of priority was cost, regulator, and customer. Right. So we trying to flip that into customer, regulation, and cost. So fundamentally, the belief is that if you give outstanding service to your customer, I think for example, in one of our business like auto, we have maybe more than 70% of customers renewing our insurance year on year to all of that. So the whole customer centricity become core to everything that we do. And then from a talent statement, right, talent problem statement, you cannot bring people from the similar industry where the priorities were different, right? Because it's also about, so one of the things that as a result we look at in our talent philosophy is mindset is greater than skill set. It's so important to be bringing people with the right mindset into the company rather than bringing them and trying to change, because it's very hard to change humans because you've been operating in certain way for 15 years, 20 years, 10 years, then you're bringing them, that transformation project will be like transformation forever, right? And it's not going to change. So I think giving a lot of emphasis on, the entry point, I think it makes so much about building the right culture, right? That's first point. Two, I think there are certain core things that we follow. I was actually sharing this with one of them before this conversation. There are two schools of thought, right? One is that you write down all your values, DNA, everything, document, put it on the wall, then you try kind of changing human behaviors. The second school of thought, which is the difficult one, is that you have your top leaders actually start behaving in actually the DNA of the company. So we've taken the second route. So if any of you ever been to any of the Acko offices, you won't see vision, mission, values. You won't see any of that. It's not visible anywhere, right? But do people carry an understanding of what's the core of the company? Absolutely. Everybody understands, right? So I think we're trying to build, it's a very hard way of building culture. It's a very hard way of building a company. But we believe we are not here to build, though we are referred as a startup, we are not here to build a startup for, valuation and all of that. We're here to build a business that lasts, generations. Actually, we say that we are in an institution building journey, because if somebody in this room has to buy an insurance from Acko, that means they would look for, next 50 years, next 60 years, 70 years, is this business going to be there, right? So I think institution building journeys are harder, but I think this whole mindset part, making people honest, it kind of makes, I think my job is very easy. I don't consider it to be a difficult one. I don't consider it to be a lot of balancing needed. And I think that's how I put the answer. So it's having the right structure, put the ownership on people. And I also see well-being from a slightly higher order, like than just talking about the initiative that you drive post somebody going through an experience, versus can we actually build right structures? But one of the things that we recently rolled out, so earlier we had this concept of every Wednesday people work from home, right? We said it makes no sense when we kind of started talking about it, because, okay, I'm not going to say that we're calling people back. We actually said flexibility is an individual choice. Satheesh may have a flexibility which is very different from, somebody else in the room, right? For example, I like to work early mornings. I want to get back home by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Versus a youngster engineer may want to start the day at 11 o'clock. So we said flexibility is an individual choice. There is no company level policy on work from home. You can work from home when you feel like, as long as you and your manager and you and your team have understanding about it. It's absolutely fine. So we leaving that responsibility to individual. Okay. So there will be those 5%, 10% people who will go on the other side of the, and one of the things that we also do is we don't roll out any policies. We say guidelines. Yeah. So we give guidelines to individuals, operate within the guidelines. If you go outside of the guidelines, somebody will identify, I don't think I need to do that job, right? So whether it's the manager or leader. And startups often go through this issue of when the businesses usually grow much faster than the people in startups, right? I think if you don't invest enough into your leadership capability building and manager capability building, you are not going to build a culture that lasts. It will break. I think one of the things that being heavily focused is, can we give enough investment in terms of building people capability? So one of my largest budget on people related area is training leaders and managers, right? So I think that's how we have been able to sustain. I think I'll take very less credit. I give all credit to my leaders and managers in the organization. I think they've been able to keep this culture going. And another indicator to startups would also be, what's an average tenure of people in leadership team in the company? I think we have people who've been here from inception 8 years. They're an 8-year-old company. I think that should give you some color of, yeah.
And that's quite interesting that you said about, some would even call it freedom more than anything else from the traditional structure of an organization, right? But you spoke about not having processes but having guidelines, right? Correct.
Yeah.
Culturally, it's
that's right.
very different. And having the flexibility to work whenever, whatever times you feel. But does technology help you in that kind of integration so that our job becomes efficient, and
Yeah.
the end customer doesn't suffer at the end.
Absolutely.
That's how business is run. Right?
Yeah. So I'll give you a very small example, while I can give you a number of examples, right? So we are in the process of implementing a tool. So let's take a simple, like there are about 300 technology team is about 330. I think about 200 odd of them will be engineers, right? Largely individual contributors. How does it matter when they come to office and do? It shouldn't really matter. So at the same time, how do we measure productivity? I don't exactly recall the name of the product. We just implemented it about a week back. So what this product does is every code that Jira or whichever other system they use, so engineers are measured on how they code, the quality of code. It's not by the number of lines, how they code, the design of the code, and a couple of parameters, right? So what this tool does is it actually gives the scorecard back to the engineer that how's been your last 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, right? So if this scales well, I really visualize a world that there is no concept of performance management for this, individual engineers. So I think we're trying this in every part of the organization in different forms, and it's not a one-fit-all approach. It's very specific to job families and the talent segment. I think it should take us to a place that the talent philosophy. One of the pieces that we've fundamentally changed is we all are very familiar with the whole concept of performance and potential. We don't have any such structures on Ninebox. We're actually moving into more focused about, there are 2 other vectors that actually play a very big role in the current segment of talent is trajectory and fungibility, right? I think the previous panel spoke about, people being on the same job for decades. I think it's so important that people end up doing things they love doing, and that what they like doing, it's actually keep changing in every 2-3 years days, right? So, and fungibility of talent, and what's been the trajectory in the recent, like you and me must have grown certain phases of our career much faster than maybe after I became a dad and my parenting responsibility started. I may not be spending that equal amount of time at work, right? So, how does these roles play in terms of building, the right organization is some of that we do. But I given you a small example of 2, but there are a number of other pieces that we use.
Fantastic. And that brings me to Srinivasan. Satheesh spoke about technology, and no technology conversation is without an AI conversation, right? And but has AI actually made people more fungible? Has it allowed people to be more flexible? Are you seeing a trend where the people that you work with, your colleagues, have they become more agile with AI? What's your take on it?
I think it's still early days, and there is a lot of grayness in people's mind about how all of this is going to pan out. See, the way I look at it, whether it is for HR, whether it is for any other function, one clear thing, outcome of this AI revolution is that the administrative side of the house is going to be very, very, if not completely getting eliminated, right? So people will have to really work their way up the value chain, and people will have to start looking at how can I be more strategic than just being, task oriented or tactical, if you will. There's really no way out of it, because pretty much everything that is routine, everything which is repetitive, AI can do, and can do it faster, better, cheaper, whatever adjective you want to find, it will all apply, right? And therefore, you really don't have an option but to, like I said, work your way around. If I look at our industry, I come from the IT industry, we go to, let's say, we have our level 1, level 2, typical, ladder of roles, etc. Our new level 1 is yesterday's level 2 plus to level 3. Because the earlier level 1, level 2 is gone, right? Now, how do we adapt to it? We really have to figure out how, but we still want those people to operate at this level 1 cost, right? Those things don't change. AI cannot change the cost factor and the mindset, right? So you really have to now figure out how can you get people with that level of experience, expertise, but then provide a value and outcome at those higher levels, right? So we used to go to campus and hire fresh graduates and then say we'll train them. Now we are going into the graduates 2-3 semesters ahead and weaving into their curriculum what we want, so that by the time they come, they're coming fairly cooked, right, and ready for consumption, right? So and we prepare them for a level which is far higher. So that's the way we adapt. Now it's a two-way street. Now we can want to do any of those things, but unless the people really understand that they will have to now be better skilled, maybe learn new skills, and learn how to make AI their friend and not get worried whether AI is going to take their jobs. The typical debate that keeps going on. We really are not going to find the option, right? So today, it's no longer about compliance. It's no longer about hiring talent. It's no longer about processing payroll or things of the kind. It is about really how can you create the required outcomes out for the business and for the end customers. That's the base.
What you're saying is this agility is more related to skill. It's a skill-based agility, right? And that is, in your case, what is improving performance, and that's where AI has its biggest impact. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because like I said, things are going to keep changing, and whether you like it or not, business is going to come back and ask for newer things. Now, change is great, but change very rarely motivates. It tends to, like I said earlier, right, tends to degrade, and that could be change fatigue that's coming. And that's where, people like us from HR will have to really play a role to make sure that we explain to people, because AI will tell you, today AI can do a lot of analytics. So the good thing is your day-to-day job of really churning out reports for management, really figuring out all the details, all of that is gone because at the click of a button, ask the right prompt and it will tell you everything that you need. The question is, what do you do with all of the data? How do you meaningfully use it? How do you use it in a way that it addresses the business demand without diluting the people quotient, right? So you know what to do, you know how to do it, but who's going to tell you why you're doing it? And that's where the narrative will have to become stronger, right? And that's where we'll have to spend a lot of effort, not just as HR, but all leadership in the organization, is explain why we are doing it and tell people that they are not going to be left behind. They're going to be carried forward, in this journey for better things and for a better future for themselves, for the company, and for the society at large. That narrative, I think, is where many of us will have to put our maximum time and focus.
Absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. And that brings me to Lavanya. Lavanya, the industry, every industry these days is an innovation-driven industry. I mean, that's what you've heard from fellow panelists as well. Now, what are the future-ready HR practices that you think are possible, which will align this kind of innovation-driven strategy with business growth?
Sure. So I think pretty much what my fellow panelists have said, innovation is existing in every industry, whichever industry we talk about. But the industry that we are talking about today moves faster than what we can think of. And how can we reduce the sprint cycle of each innovation is what makes a very critical difference between how one competes with another organization. And every company exists for the sake of its business results and the success it derives quarter on quarter, right? So it's all about how soon can you deliver those results. And some of the HR practices may not be very different from what it has been in the past, because it is all the agenda or the objective has always been the same. But what I would like to piggyback upon what a few of them said is, today we are talking about personalizing a lot of stuff and individualization of things. So who are the folks who are working on this innovation? It is the same set of people, it is the same human beings. How do we personalize on some of these things that will help people as an individual asset that will make a difference to the organization? So what are those HR practices that would bring in? Today we talk about a lot of flexible working hours, We talk about how it is different for each individual, like how he said a Wednesday might not suit for everyone. So if Wednesday is when you are having a session on innovation, you're not going to have everyone there. So how do we do that? Or are we going to have a session on how to innovate in a workshop? It doesn't work out that way. Innovation does not happen in a classroom session. So are we giving them enough opportunities? Are we creating interventions which allow them to think out of the box? Are you creating an organization which has a framework where risk is accepted and people are vulnerable to talk about the mistakes that they committed? So are we creating, as HR leaders of organization, are we creating that kind of a culture is something that I would want each one of us to think about while we talk about the future practices. Similarly, I would say that the market of talent, we are not restricting to just today, for example, Bangalore. The market is quite open. The borders are just fading away. So can we look at talent across the globe? And today we are talking about gig economy. We are talking about people not working full time. We have a lot of student population who are willing to understand how corporates work. Are we engaging them to bring in a lot of innovation? Are we going back to academic institutions, telling what are the problems that the corporates are facing today, to look at what are those innovation solutions that they can come up with? How is that partnership going to be looking like? And then how are we talking about integrating life with work? It's no more choosing between work and life. How do we enable people to, integrate both of them? All these, along with a lot of beautiful other practices that I could go on, and technology enabling it. Because today we have AI which will give you nudges on, you have not learned something new for the last few weeks, to this is something that you're working currently and you need to learn this, to a lot of certification programs if you would like to deep dive into. A lot of programs. Today you talk about from an HR point of view, no more is it a mandatory requirement that a one-on-one needs to happen in person. You have AI tools which interact not through a very boring robotic method, but a very interactive method to find out what is the pulse of the organization. So like how my colleague said, you have a lot of data which comes in. It is about how we use the data, how we utilize the resources that exist within the organization to customize what is the requirement for the industry, for the company that we are dealing with. And that is what is important at this point of time.
Interesting you picked up about risk, managing risk, mitigating risk, of course. How does technology in your scenarios, because how does technology help in augmenting your risk averseness or preparedness for future? Because future is changing so fast that we cannot even think about, planning for it. So, especially when it comes to risks are, increasing globally,
So, I can talk about, I will address that in twofold. One, I'll talk about today, we are no more hiring for a competency, or we are talking about skill set which is constantly changing. So, it's a skill-based economy. First and foremost thing is that do we have technology to understand what is the skill that exists today in our company? What is it that exists? With my experience in the industry, many of the systems that we have today in place are either broken or do not speak to each other. And hence, for the leadership team to have one comprehensive overview of what is the existing skill set is missing. Second, have we tapped in to understand what is the secondary skill that people are upskilling themselves on? And how are we giving them projects or simulated experiences to make it more practical to learn it at their job level? So there are tools that are available, technology that is available, especially in the industry where I belong to, semiconductors. It is very competitive. We are talking about the new gen products. There's a lot of demand for the newer chips, a lot of efficiency and performance metrics. The technology exists, but I would say the challenge is about how we utilize it is a much more deeper question that we should be diving into.
Interesting. Thank you. Now, before we move to the Q&A section, one last, and we'll go around the panel, what is the one piece of advice, and we'll start with you, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to future CHROs considering, the way AI is changing the way we work, and it's changing the culture. Acko, it's no longer process driven, it's guideline driven. So, what is the one piece of advice that each one of you would give to future aspiring CHROs?
I wouldn't call it an advice, but I think it's extremely important that HR is not on the sidelines. Understand the business. Business is everybody's business. So, understand the business, understand what is the problem your organization is trying to solve, who are the stakeholders external whom they're trying to solve this problem for. Have a P&L mindset. Thinking about cost efficiency or optimizing costs is not a wrong thing for HR. So understanding business is extremely important, and engage with your talent pipeline, starting with the academic institutions. I think if you can engage with the academic institutions, extremely good. Engage in terms of upskilling and reskilling your workforce. I think we all have a responsibility. I was talking to one of the panelists saying with so much technology coming in and we have so much of manpower, and not everybody is a high potential, but they need a livelihood. So what exactly are you going to do about ensuring that we are upskilling people, our existing people, engaging with the academic institutions to ensure those livelihoods are in place? We do have a responsibility. We may shirk away saying, I have programs for high potentials, extremely top talent, but that's not what we should be looking at, I think. And while you have a business mindset, be responsible towards people. I think being sensitive, responsible, not everybody is going to be a top performer. So see what are the avenues you can create in terms of training them, and what are the opportunities that exist. That is our responsibility, I think. Yeah.
No, because I come from a consumer tech industry, let me give an I don't know, it's an advice, but I'll probably tell what worked, and I keep saying this to my teams, and it's not just for CHROs. I think anybody in the people function and who thinking or looking, aspiring to be the CHROs, right? I think the closest example that I can give is think like a product manager. Yeah. What I meant by that, I think some of them spoke about data, information available, right? How does the product building journey happen? It's very iterative in nature. They try it out in certain cohorts. They're going to they check with customer if it's working. What their product managers also additionally carry is very, very high empathy for consumer, right? So just flip this and look at it as an HR leader. Can I see patterns? Can I see data across organization? Can I also be? I think empathy is also. I feel empathy in action or compassion would be a better word to use. I think be compassionate about people and think like a product manager. You don't need to get it right on day one. I think where we mostly go wrong is we end up looking at practices across companies and we say, hey, X company is doing, Y company is doing, let me also do it. I think what works for them not necessarily work for you, right? I think being iterative in anything that you want to do, test it out in few pockets, right? Start building on it. Start learning from everything that an employee come back and tell you as feedback about that particular program. It's exactly how a product manager builds and how the product journey goes. And if the more and more that people function or people in the people function start operating this way, I think we will end up creating far meaningful impact on business and people than just doing top-down approach of, hey, here is the new program, take it. I think that's one piece of advice I think I can give. Yeah.
Lavanya.
I have two pieces of advice. One, I'll say it starts with the individual HR heads. It's not easy to be where we are. I think we need to be the role models to show that we can balance things out. With so many expectations from the HR heads to balance the internal organizational dynamics, to engagement surveys, to the to show the P&L accounts right, to ensure that the leaders are engaged, your employees are retained. The expectations are high. My first advice to the HRs would be to be the role models that you would want your leadership team to display, be vulnerable, say what you would want to take breaks and have a life. That's my first piece of advice. And the second one, I would probably give an acronym of CORE, which is CORE. C stands for the cultural architects. I would want to see the HRs being a very, important component of creating cultures in their organization And that has to be very intentionally built over a period of time. It doesn't come up on day one. And as my fellow colleagues here said, it would not be something that's written on the walls. It is something that is lived every day. So how is it that the HRs can build that? And the second one is about the outcome orientation. Many a times HR tends to do things just because somebody's asked for it. We don't push back enough. We don't ask why. We don't link it back to why is it important for the business. I think it's high time that the HR has a say on that, and it should be an important part of the HRs as we go forward. The R stands for the resource optimizer, as my colleague here said. We have a lot of people and not all of them are going to be your star performers. How do you engage the talent in their multifaceted skills that they have is going to be a core component of what HR does. And the last one is going to be the empathy or compassion that we would say. It is not that the HR alone has to be empathetic. Can we build that into the organization? Can we have the leaders play that role day in and day out in their every one-on-one conversations or feedback giving is something that I would call out as a future advice. Thank you.
Ravi.
I'd use one word, clarity. So I think every HR person's role, whether it's a CHRO or not, is to bring clarity to people. Clarity about the company's vision, clarity about what leadership wants to do or doesn't want to do, clarity about values, clarity about what we are expected to do in our roles, clarity about what the customer wants, clarity about nearly everything in the organization. If we are able to do that or help others do that, I think we have done our jobs.
Srinivasan.
Like I said, I fear two things. One is, with all the AI thing coming in, whether there will be a sense of arrogance that will come into especially the leadership level, right? Where people, the leaders believe that people are no longer critical because you have AI which can do so many things, right? And that's a very dangerous thing in my opinion because the people factor is not necessarily going to go. And whether, and I've seen that very easily where people come and say, oh, we don't need this layer, let's just eliminate this, etc. But at the end of the day, it's not just a business to business, it is people to people, it is stakeholder to stakeholder, it's customer to an individual, etc. So I think that's something that we really need to keep in mind. And as HR leader and a future HR leader, I think that's one thing, that how do we still retain the valuation of the people story within your organization. That's a very, very important thing, no matter what technology changes are. And even the most tech-driven organization, we'll have to really figure out how people, culture, and valuation and the entire employee value proposition is still sustained and enhanced. And that story comes in. And really use, I would say, culture and values to drive compliance, rather than saying control, right? That's the key thing in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.